Welcome, everyone, to the No Bull, Just Bacon podcast. I am your host, Dr. Allan, and with me here today is Coach Beth to answer all of your burning health and fitness questions from around the social media world. Today's episode is brought to you by Brondo, the thirst mutilator. If you don't drink Brondo, fuck you. This is a rapid fire episode, and we have a ton of great topics to cover, so let's get rolling.
Nobody's going to get that reference.
They won't, but it makes me happy. If in a modest deficit, can you body recomp over time versus a strict deficit bulk cycles? We've talked about this type of stuff before, so I don't really want to spend a massive amount of time on this, but I do want to emphasize because I've had a bunch of conversations with clients recently about this very thing. The answer is yes, recomposition can happen, and it can happen in pretty much everybody. But the problem is it becomes really problematic for people that are not brand new to training, not obese, not on steroids, that type of thing. When you are planning how you're going to set up your nutrition, because whether you recomp, whether you bulk, whether you cut, I mean, this is all driven by nutrition, right? When you're determining which one of these things that you should choose, I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction than what we've done before, because in the past we've talked about, okay, this is when you can do it the best. This is when, this is when these other things make more sense. What I want to look at here is the mental side, the emotional side of things that we haven't touched on quite as much in the past. People will almost always, and Beth can counter this if she thinks differently. In my experience, when I talk with clients about this type of thing, people will always choose recomping over a build. If you explain the pros and cons, they'll say, I want to do the recomp, because when you hear you can lose body fat, you can gain muscle at the same time, in their mind, they think that's exactly what I want to do. What completely gets glossed over is how long that takes. And I think that that's what bears emphasizing here, because if you're choosing recomping, you could build. Now, building takes a long time. I mean, it takes time to build muscle, a significant amount of time, a lot more time than people are willing to put in, which is why you see almost nobody with a good body, a good athletic toned physique. The physique that you're going for requires more than what most people are willing to do. One of the big requirements of that is probably a 1 to 2 year dedicated building phase at some point. People don't like that idea because I tell them, and I'm always very truthful with people when we open up about this. You're going to think that you look worse for many months before you think that you look better, before you feel like it's really doing something, before you feel like you're getting the benefits that have been promised to you from doing these things. You're going to think my program doesn't work. My nutrition doesn't work. My coach is stupid. This is dumb. I'm not going where I want to go. I want to pull out. So as a coach, even though we know that that will be the fastest way to get you to where you want to be, we have to give you alternatives, because if emotionally it's going to be really rough for you, you got to know all the different things that you can do. Recomping sounds like the holy grail. And if it really worked super well, this would be the only thing that we did, and there would never be conversations about anything else. The reality is it doesn't work very well. And so when you decide that you want to recomp and you hear, I'm going to build muscle, I'm going to lose body fat, the stars are going to be shining, the world's going to be puppies and fireworks, that's what you think. And that's not what it's going to be, because now you're taking that 1 to 2 year period and you're making it something more like 5 of dedicated. Like, you're going to be strict with your nutrition through all of these years.
Yep. Y'all just need to build. I'm tired of this.
You really do. I mean, because what's going to happen is either way, you're going to burn out. Yep. And so, if you accept the shorter path, maybe it's probably, you might see some things there. But my concern, and obviously there's not one direct answer, but you need to be able to dedicate yourself and go into it with your eyes open instead of closing your eyes, screaming and just running and hoping that it works out. Because I see this all the time with people that recomp. If you think, hey, a few months of being in a build and having it hard to notice where I'm seeing benefits is going to be tough. I mean, a recomp outside of that beginning period where you're actively noticing some of that fat loss because you just started and you had the most fat that you're ever going to have at the beginning of that cycle. Once you're a few months in, that's going to level out. And the amount of fat loss that you see is going to be on the fractions of a pound every 2 to 4 weeks. And the lean muscle building is going to be blunted. And in some people in a recomp, you're not really going to build much, if any, muscle because you're going to be stalling out that potential, particularly if you're somebody who has had issues putting muscle on in the past. You're relatively lean to begin with, because I get a lot of people who, they're, for all intents and purposes, they're a lean person, but they're just soft. And if you believe that you're a lean person, but you're soft and you just want to tighten up, recomp is very difficult because you're essentially stalling out what makes you tight, that building that lean muscle, and you're hoping that the fat loss aspect takes over, and it's not going to. So if you buy in for a recomp, it's typically 3 to 5 years, if not more, before you're, where you really, really start to be happy with where you want to be. It takes that long. In the beginning, specifically, particularly if you're brand new to training, particularly if you have a lot of body fat to lose, you're going to see accelerated rates of progress. And I don't have a problem with recomping under those conditions at all for people, because you'll see a lot of progress. If you're on steroids, you see a lot of progress. But what I want to do is I want to really get in the mindset of, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I know that mentally and emotionally, I can't handle being in a dedicated calorie surplus, then I'm going to mentally and emotionally dedicate myself to a long period of this, and not getting dissuaded by, 6 months in and saying, oh, well, I'm not close to my goal, because you won't be. But people ignore that because they want to hear that they can do everything that they want and there are no downsides. And by saying it takes longer, they kind of gloss over that and they focus on the promise of building muscle and losing fat. And there's a lot of, online coaches that will say, hey, you do my program, it's like 90 days, you're going to build a lot of muscle, you're going to lose about a lot of body fat. I mean, if you're just starting out and this is the first program that you're getting into, you'll probably see that kind of stuff. And this is where you get those reviews of these programs. And they're like, yeah, it really works. This is amazing. You don't talk to these people after those first 60 or 90 days, when now they've hit that intermediate grind and they're going to be there for years. And so that's what builds this momentum for this type of training, because you never see the follow up with the people when reality slaps them in the face. And so we talk about this a lot, but we talk about this a lot because this is the thing that people really struggle with. And if we can make some changes in the way that people view these things, being ripped with abs could be your ultimate goal, but maybe having some love for the performance aspects, for building strength, for getting really strong, for just having some fun in the gym and not making it feel like a burden and a drain at all times, can be what it takes to make this a long-term result. Beth, what have you seen as far as all this goes? Whenever you get in the crossroads where you're talking with somebody, and I'm going to paint the picture of, you've been working with a person, because typically what I will do when I work with people is I'll know that they probably need to go into maintenance or above for long periods of time. I mean, most people should from the beginning. But I also know that they'll be motivated more by losing some body fat initially, losing some weight on the scale initially. And so we'll go in with either a cut or a decently aggressive lower recomp. But I know in my heart that I'm going to have a conversation with that person at some point, and I'm going to have to give them the options of recomping up to build that muscle, or going into a lean build or a clean build, or whatever it is. How have you seen the reactions from people when you get to that point? Or do you
Nobody wants
address
to
it
do it.
differently where you don't get to that point and there's something else you do?
I mean, I've had very few people actually complete builds. So typically what you end up having to do as a coach in this scenario is manage expectations the best that you can, given that people are the maximum that they want to do is sit at maintenance and recomp over time. I have one client right now in particular who this is an ongoing conversation, because she is in that space where she does not want to build. And in her defense, she had a bad experience in a build several years ago. I think she signed up for something through her gym, and like somebody at her gym put her on like 2,500 calories and she got like kind of chunky.
What's her maintenance roughly?
And
you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, her like that was too much.
It was a big build.
There was too many calories for
Yeah.
her to be building on. Like her maintenance is close to mine. It's around like 1900 to 2000. So a 2500 build would not really be necessary, and that's not even where I would start her. You might be able to work your way up to that over time, but they bumped her up like right away. And this is when she was smaller too. So 2500 was more than she should have been, especially at that time. So right now, and that kind of gave her a bad experience for what to expect in a build. So she has it in her mind that a build means getting fat, right? And she also was not following progressive overload programming at the time. So it was two bad things in one fail swoop. So she and I have had that conversation multiple times that I'm fine with her sitting at maintenance, lifting heavy and doing what she needs to do. And the scale is slowly increasing. Like it's increased by about, I think, 3 pounds since we first started. And I'm trying to like nudge the calories up ever so slowly. But she has a couple of times mentioned how frustrated she is at how slow this process is. She said, she said, I can tell a difference that I can tell I'm physically stronger. I can squat heavier. I can do more push-ups than I used to be able to. I can do more pull-ups than I used to be able to. So I can tell that there is strength progress there. And, my measurements on my quads and my biceps are going up. So I know that it's happening, but I can't physically see it. And I told her, I'm like, you're not going to.
Yeah, and I think what's really rough for people is that, especially when they start out in a cut, because like I said, I will often do that first just to we want to get a person in, we want to get them comfortable.
Well,
It
this
gives
person does not need to cut. She's
okay,
lean. She's
okay,
very lean. So she does not, if she had body fat to lose, I would have done that with her, but she does not at all. Like that's not going to motivate her in any way, shape, or form. She actually wants to she wants to gain muscle.
hmm. Well, so here's what I'm
She wants to see it though. And she's not, I
right.
keep telling her, if you're going to do it this way, if you are going to be in this incredibly slow 5-year recomp, you need to be comparing your progress pictures annually instead of weekly. You are not going to physically see
Yeah.
with your eyeballs what you are wanting to see until half a decade from now.
Yeah, and so this is what I was getting at with oftentimes we'll cut first. If you have a person that is lean, I can show you pictures of myself with a 20-pound difference, and a lot of times I look bigger with 20 less pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because cut gives the illusion of size, particularly
Yeah.
when you don't have a reference. Like if you're not standing next to a person, it doesn't do the same thing when you're standing next to the person. But for social media, for progress pictures, when you're looking at yourself in the mirror because you're ultra critical of yourself, when you switch from being lean, whether that's you've been at the bottom of a cut or you're just a naturally lean person, to starting to add in calories, you're gonna feel like it almost looks like you've lost muscle
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to have a small layer of fat over that muscle. And so you're going to have more water and muscle glycogen. It's essentially going to like smooth out that
You're not going to see that tone that you
display
want
of
to see.
tone that you had
Yeah.
before. Yeah. And that's the way that it is. But that's the only way to really get to where you want to
Yeah.
go. Because like Beth said, I mean, at a bare minimum, 6 months, probably best at a year to be comparing like, okay, well, did I gain any muscle?
Yeah.
And then there's people that will waste all their damn money on getting like those body composition scale changes to see if this has worked. And those things are pieces of crap because like even if we're
Yeah.
using Dexa has an error rate of like 3 to 5%. So until you've gone 6%, like until you've gained 6% lean mass, you don't know if you've gained 1%.
Yeah.
And so people are trying to use so directionally, assuming you can have laboratory conditions to where you measure things, and people don't typically do that. Like if you're getting your DEXA not first thing in the morning upon waking before or after going to the bathroom before eating, one, there's error in play there already. So it's not laboratory conditions. They love to point out, and people love DEXA because they're like, oh, it's the research standard. It's the research standard because in research you can control how the person's coming in. 6 a.m. they're in there after going to the bathroom, not eating or drinking anything. This is not you. You're not getting into a DEXA lab at 6 a.m. You're getting up, you're eating breakfast. You might go to your
You're going at
doctor
like 3 p.m.
3
after
p.m. after
eating
you worked out.
4
Like
meals.
you're not under laboratory conditions. So one, that 6% change that I just talked about is much higher because every time you do this, there's error in play because you have different food weight, you've drank more water, you had different sodium, you had all this stuff comes into play. Just being awake changes because cortisol spikes in the morning, and then you've got the cortisol variations, which affect water, how your body's holding water. Like there's a ton of shit that gets into play. So you have that problem. And so these scales don't even help. Now, technically, they can tell directionality, which is what when somebody's trying to push these, they'll be like, we can show directionality. We've got like a 1% margin of error between readings and all that stuff. Yes, for a professional athlete under laboratory conditions, that's not you. And even that 1% margin of error doesn't account for the 3 to 5% individual error. It doesn't tell you your exact lean muscle mass. It doesn't tell you your exact fat mass. It can tell directionality when everything is controlled, but you're never going to be in that controlled situation. So even that is very, very problematic. And that's why we don't use any of these things, because when we look at what it looks like on paper versus what actually happens in real life is a shit show. So this becomes really problematic. And so you have to look out at larger, longer periods. And this is why we always talk about, hey, performance is a far better measure of how things are going. Are your lifts going up over time? Are you able to handle more volume? Are you recovering better? All of these things are far more important than anything else because muscle mass and strength and performance are directly related. People like to have this idea that somehow you can build all the muscle or all the strength that you want to without building muscle mass and that it's somehow magical. That does not happen. The neurological benefits to any kind of training mostly max out at 4 to 6 weeks. So for the first 4 to 6 weeks that you bench press, you've never bench pressed before, the first 4 to 6 weeks that you do a new training cycle and you've got a new lift, you're going to have a bump up in strength really quickly in that lift, and then it's going to level off. Now you can improve form, but that's not improving strength. You might be able to lift more through form improvements or through, technical lifts have this kind of thing like snatch, clean and jerk. You can have time periods where you're dramatically going up in these lifts beyond the neurological period, but that's just because you're training the movement and becoming more efficient with the movement. It's not because the muscles are firing better. It's not because you have better rate coding. It's not because you're having better actin myosin cross linking. I mean, it's a bunch of nerd talk, but essentially you're just getting more skill. But at some point, you're going to be as skilled as you're going to be. And so that neurological part of of practical strength goes out the window because it's done. And then the only thing that you can do is make the muscle bigger to be able to handle more strength. There's a reason there is no world's strongest man competitor that's 150 pounds. Like you cannot just completely do that without getting bigger. And so if you're training long enough and you're experienced enough, the neurological side effect will work, the neurological adaptations will work their way out, the skill adaptations will work their way out. And then the only thing that's going to continue to build strength is to build a bigger muscle. And so if your performance is increasing over longer periods of time, it is impossible for you to not be building muscle. It's impossible. They're inextricably linked. And so performance, this is why we talk about this a lot. And I talk about this quite a bit with my clients. Whenever you have training for long enough periods of time, you basically stop looking at the changes in the scale. You basically stop looking at the progress photos, and you still take them because you want to be able to tell long-term trends. But the performance increases happen much more readily, and those are a better indicator of short-term progress than literally anything else. Now, certainly there are psychological components, emotional components. I have a better relationship with food. I have a better relationship with my body. All those things are super important and great signs of progress. But if we're talking about the physical sides, performance becomes your anchor. And so when you're no longer losing body fat regularly, you're not losing that pound a week. And so you can't see it in the mirror all the time. You better rely on something. And that's what's there. Those body comp scales are not going to be it. And so this all ties in with recomping because whether it's recomping or whether it's cutting and building phases, there are going to be points where you can't rely on the scale and the mirror to motivate yourself. And so you have to find something else. Either you love lifting and love eating good food, and that would be optimal. Then it doesn't feel like you're actually pushing yourself. This is what you want to do anyways. Or you keep your motivation up by focusing on the progress that you make in the gym. And that's how this is really going to work. Whether you choose recomping, whether you choose bulking or cutting, you're going to need something that's going to keep you going outside of those, 3, 4, 5, 6 months that anybody can force themselves to do anything. Beyond that, you have to have a deeper reason for doing something and deeper motivations. And so this is where this comes into play. All right. Thoughts on bone broth and beef isolate protein. I just did probably the most comprehensive podcast that I have ever done on collagen with Joe DeFranco this past week. So if you want to hear about that, go listen to his latest episode. These have the exact same answer because bone broth, beef protein isolate, are the exact same thing essentially as collagen. Now, the peptides, the amino acid matrices are very, very slightly different, but for all intents and purposes, they're exactly the same thing. They're very deficient in isoleucine, leucine, and valine. Most of the essential amino acids, they're very high in hydroxyproline and glycine. People get confused about these because they show up the same as any other protein on a protein label. When something says protein on a label, it's not assessing quality of protein. And there's a very big difference in the quality of these three proteins, the collagen, the bone broth, the beef isolate, and actual meat, poultry, fish. Those are night and day difference. The problem is people don't realize that. And bone broth in particular has been really, beef protein isolate has been pushed towards the gym bros. Bone broth has been pushed towards elderly women. This is a super easy way to get another 30 or 40 grams of protein into your diet. This is a super easy way. It's super easy on the stomach. Yeah, it's super easy on the stomach because it has the same protein source as Jell-O. And we give that to people in hospitals because it's very, very easy to flavor. It's very, very easy on the stomach. It's super easy to digest, and it's super easy to digest because it's just a couple amino acids, and that's about it. It doesn't have the full complement that you're going to need for optimal health, for building lean muscle, for preserving lean muscle. And so these things are not appropriate to use to hit protein minimums. They're okay to supplement with if you're already hitting your protein minimums, but the biggest mistake that I'm seeing people making is that they're using these to hit protein minimums. And if you're a woman and your goal is 100 grams of protein or 120 grams of protein and 30 grams of that is from bone broth, you're fucking up because that's a very large portion that you're essentially just throwing away. And it doesn't have a difference in calories. You're still taking in all those calories that you would be taking in trying to get that protein anyways. So essentially, you're just wasting your calories and you're not hitting your protein minimums like you're attempting to because this is garbage. And it does not do what people are claiming it does. And so, if people really want to see a super in-depth, like I said, this is the most in-depth that I've ever gotten on collagen. And in fact, I go over everything in Joe DeFranco's, but yeah, I would go check that out because I explain everything. But the core of the matter is, if you want to improve things like joints, skin, hair, nails, there are better options, much more proven options. Getting your vitamin C in, tretinoin, omega-3s. Please go to Legion, pick up Triton, use the code DRBACON. I mean, that's salesy there, but it's actually going to help you as opposed to the collagen. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason, and I actually talk about this, and I do want to emphasize, I do want to acknowledge this. I believe that most of the benefits of collagen are probably placebo. I do believe that there is a chance for collagen actually making some people's joints feel better because there is some evidence that it can change synovial fluid viscosity. Now, that's different than actually healing the joints. So the tendons, ligaments, they're not actually getting better. But if the synovial fluid is a little bit more viscous, they slide, the joint slides a little bit more easily. So if you had a grindy joint before, it might feel a little bit better with this. But before doing collagen, I would get my protein into an appropriate spot. I would make sure that I'm eating enough vitamin C. You have to have vitamin C to be able to repair joints. It's needed to combine in metabolic process with proline to produce hydroxyproline, which is a very large portion of soft tissues that support joints. And people will go to the collagen first, but eating collagen to build collagen in your joints and in your skin seems to be a very similar thought process to eating liver to get a healthier liver. It doesn't seem to work out as far as we can tell. Now, there are systemic reviews that you can look at, and it will say, hey, the collagen works really, really well. But the problem is the majority of the studies and systemic reviews are subjective in nature, where they give people collagen and they'll say, hey, do you think your skin looks better? And they'll say yes. And they'll be like, okay, cool, it works. And that's the problem with the data surrounding collagen, is that, yes, we could find some very real utility or benefits from it. The issue is even if it is there, I suspect that it's far lower in magnitude than what we think or what it's being marketed as. Okay. So if you want the real in-depth, go to Joe DeFranco's. That's where it all is. All right. Next question. I just got my gym membership and I don't know where to start. You should pick up our group fitness class, our group fitness training at MauiAthletics.com. That's where you should start. That is the easiest way for people to get into this. It costs like $1 a day about, and it's professional level coaching with professional level support. There's literally nothing on the market better. Having said that, if you're really strapped for cash and that's an issue, it doesn't matter if you're just joining a gym. It doesn't matter whether you are interested in free weights, machines, whatever it is, just get started. They both offer significant benefits. You're not going to miss out on a massive amount by just starting with machines. I believe that a comprehensive program should include both, if possible. But I see a lot of people that when they start out, they get concerned because they think that they've got to be using, the hardcore stuff that bodybuilders use all the time. Bodybuilders use a lot of machines. They use a Smith machine, tons. They use cables, hammer strength, any kind of rowing machine, like literally every machine a bodybuilder would use. And I know that people don't want to become bodybuilders, a lot of people, but if your goal is to build lean muscle, you better incorporate some of the things that bodybuilders do because they do it for a reason. And so machines will work just fine. As long as your program is set up appropriately, it has appropriate volume, you've learned about intensity, you've learned about proper rest periods, you've learned about proper exercise order, make it all out of machines if you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever will get you in there. And even in the very beginning, like we're talking about with this person, literally just going and hopping on 2 or 3 machines and leaving is completely fine. Mm-hmm. To get that habit built. So don't get me wrong, you don't necessarily need to go into our program and have a very strict program from the outset. You just need to start going. If you want some support and want some guidance and don't want to feel lost, sure, do that because we give, exercise demos with every lift. We tell you how long to rest. We tell you lifting tempo. We tell you intensity. Like all of that stuff is taken care of for you. If that's not for you,
substitutions and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it literally it makes it idiot proof essentially. But, a lot of people don't want to start out there and they just want to get in. That's completely fine. Do what will make it sustainable for you. And make sure that you're taking advantage of just getting in at first, because that habit building is far more valuable than anything else. Did I miss anything there?
No, I agree.
All right. Next question. And this one, I apologize because I'm probably going to monopolize some of it, but you can tell me what I missed when we talk about this. When do you know you just can't increase weight anymore in a certain muscle group? Essentially, how do you know that you've hit a lifting plateau? That's what this question is. Lifting plateaus this is funny. I literally just did a nutrition plateau podcast with Andrew Coates. So if you're interested in that, go to that one. But this is the lifting side of it. We didn't cover the lifting side. Plateaus, first off, there's a loop that everybody is in when they're trying to get better at anything in health and fitness. You give yourself a stressor of some kind, your body adapts, your body recovers, rinse and repeat. You recover, you adapt a little bit, you start back at stressors, and it all just it spins. Stressors, recovery, adaptation, stressors, recovery, adaptation. I think I went out of order the first time I said it. Stressors, recovery, adaptation, and then it just keeps going in that loop, right? And so before changing anything, I would ask myself a few questions. Am I patient enough with this? Because you sticking at the same weight for a few weeks or even a couple months after you're an intermediate is not a sign of a plateau. Realize first off that a plateau is not failing. When you've reached a plateau, you've reached a new high and you're maintaining that new high. And so people will oftentimes be like, I'm at a plateau, nothing's working. That doesn't mean nothing's working. It means you're maintaining a new high. And so things are working pretty well, actually. How is your sleep? How is your nutrition? How is your stress? These can acutely cause things to slow down. Is your routine too complex or volume too high? Are you a science nerd? Have you listened to me before and not realized some of the nuance that I've talked about? When we talk about how many sets should we do weekly, I will always hear from the science crowd the blanket answer of 10 to 20 working sets per muscle group per week maximizes return for hypertrophy. But that includes fractional sets. And you can probably be lower on certain muscles. I mean, you can probably be lower on biceps. You can probably be lower on triceps, maybe delts. Like you don't need the same amount of volume in your biceps as you do your pecs or your glutes. It's just they're different muscles. They need different stimulation. And so fractional sets are all those half sets that are added into the research. So if they say 10 to 20 sets, it might only be 6 or 8 direct sets, and that's it. Because, a back row counts as half of a bicep. And that's how some of these numbers are so high. But people don't realize that fractional sets are in play. Is your intensity on point? Are you in that outside of the beginner stage, 0, 1, 2 reps in reserve? Do you have unrealistic expectations of progress? Did you have newbie gains in the beginning? And now you think everything is like newbie gains? Did you not realize that those neural adaptations that we just talked about, those first 4 to 6 weeks, where everything is vastly, advancing really quickly, are you expecting that all the time? That's not how it's going to happen. That's unrealistic expectations of progress. Are you even tracking diligently? Are you tracking your food? Because if you're not fueling yourself, if you're constantly trying to recomp, but your version of recomp is I'm going to stay as low on calories as I possibly can because I want to be as lean as possible and depleted as possible, you're probably going to plateau in your lifts. And this is one of those issues we were talking about with building lean muscle, is that plateau happens because people aren't fueling themselves adequately. And so maybe that's the reason. If you've given it 6 to 10 weeks, and you're not seeing progression in your lifts in some manner, then you might be actually plateaued. But having said that, if you've got like 5 exercises in your program, that doesn't mean that all 5 are going to move within 6 to 10 weeks. That means you're probably going to have the ones earlier in the program move a little bit quicker than the ones later. You may not move, like those last 2 exercises in a program may not move an entire training cycle for some people that are advanced. It's the way that it is. You're more fatigued by the time you get to those. Maybe if you really want to focus on those, you make them the beginning of the next training cycle. And then you move forward that way. You have to start doing some more things as you become more advanced to get some of these things to move. But you'll be able to identify, once you get to that stage, you start to identify your weaknesses and then you start to address the weaknesses. When you're a beginner or intermediate, you don't really need to address weaknesses so much as just keep lifting, because most weaknesses will work their way out. So assuming that we've asked ourselves these questions, we've taken, stock of our volumes, our sleep, our stress, our nutrition, patience, then we start to look for, okay, well, what do we need to do as solutions for a fitness plateau? The first thing that I would do is I would start to identify any weaknesses in the movements that I have. Is there a sticking point? Do I have a form issue? I mean, and this is something that Beth is probably very conscious of, because Form is very important for Olympic weightlifting. It's very important for CrossFit. Despite what you see in many CrossFit gyms, form is actually really important to do a lot of the things efficiently. And so maybe it's a form deficiency that's causing these issues. If your nutrition, your stress, your sleep, all that stuff is on point, hey, maybe getting a little bit better at how you do your lifts would be beneficial. And I mean, we even see this a lot in, the traditional powerlifting lifts, the big three. I mean, I can't tell you how many people think that they can bench press and they can't bench press. Because bench press, we've talked about this. It's super easy to pick up. It's difficult to master because there's a lot of little moving parts to the bench press that people don't acknowledge. And so maybe that's the issue. After looking at weaknesses and potentially addressing them, I mean, sticking points can be addressed in a variety of different ways. Like maybe you stick at like a midpoint of a bench press. So maybe you do pin presses. Maybe you stick at a certain point in a deadlift. So you do rack deadlifts and you set the rack right below where you stick. And so you just overload that spot as much as possible and then power through that. So no, you're not working the full range of motion, but you're getting a lot stronger in the spot that you're actually sticking. So when you go back in 3, 4, 5 months, to the full range of motion lift, you no longer stick at that point. And then you can start doing full range of motion from there. That helps a lot. I mean, this is actually one of the reasons that people use things like bands and chains and some of those other things, because you can, if you know what you're doing with them, you can preferentially load certain parts of lifts, and it actually makes sense. Bands and chains aren't necessary for the vast majority of people. There's usually alternatives that you can do to address sticking points in certain spots. But it is a tool that you've probably seen, and they do it for this reason when you've got an experienced coach. So address sticking points, address form, very first thing. Then are we even using progressive overload? I mean, if you're not specifically adding weight, adding volume, I mean, this is why we use a double progression, and I program it in all my one-on-one. We definitely program it in the group fitness. Progressive overload tends to work better, in my opinion. And this is anecdotal. In my opinion, a double progression works the best, where we both progress volume and load. We give a range for reps. And then we tell you to essentially stay within a certain intensity range for the load itself. That way, it allows you to push reps up within a certain range and then move load up once you have completed all of the range, for that rep. That way, it allows you to move in two different ways, so you can see progressive overload work in a little bit more of a dynamic manner that works for more people overall, even when we're taking into account how people are feeling on a day-to-day basis. Are we planning appropriate volume with appropriate rest? This is a really big one and a huge solution for a lot of these. A lot of the times people have a fitness plateau because they're doing too much volume. They're trying to hit what we were talking about before. They're not taking into account fractional sets. They're just trying to do everything at once. I see this all the time. People will be like, well, why do you program only 4 to 6 exercises in a day? Because that's all you can handle. If you're lifting correctly, you cannot handle.
I can't imagine I would die.
I mean,
I can't imagine doing more than that.
I've had some people that will send me their programs when they first sign up, and they'll be like, I have 10 exercises on this day.
So much junk volume. Like I can tell you by looking at a program like that, and I have people like that too, that are like, I really love high volume stuff. And I'm like, then I can tell you're sandbagging it.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost a dead giveaway that you're sandbagging it. Are you on tons of steroids?
Yeah.
Because if you're not, you probably can't handle that. Now, if you're on tons of
you're
steroids,
definitely phoning it in.
if you're on tons of steroids and HGH, you might be able to handle that. This is one of the big problems with like getting programming from like ChatGPT, is because it pulls from the most common programs. And I've talked about this before. They did a study on ChatGPT and what the programs that it kicks out is, and it's the muscle and strength programs from the 1990s. Those are all written by the biggest guys on the most steroids. And so people that come up with these, they come up with these programs are doing things that they can't possibly do and no actual like natural human can do. And they're like, I'm not really progressing well. And it's like, right. And because you
got a lot of junk volume.
You're doing a program that's not made for you. And so volume and appropriate rest is one of the big things. I mean, people that are getting in 45 seconds to a minute rest are probably really shooting themselves in the foot for most lifts. and they probably need more. Um, Maybe you need to change a view. You know, when people say that they've been um, plateaued for a long period of time, maybe you need some different exercises in play. Maybe you need to change your training modality. You know, have you been doing CrossFit forever and you're like, my physique's not where I want it to be? Well, maybe you should do some physique training. If you've been doing bodybuilding for a long period of time and you're like, my physique's not where it should be, it's like maybe you should do some strength training, get your strength up, and then come back to physique training later, and start to focus on that then. But changing scenery can be a really good thing, because it can reinvigorate you for the training that you have. I mean, maybe even just from a mental standpoint, that emotional support can be a very beneficial thing. Beth, you've changed training modalities more than most people because you've tried out a whole bunch
Yeah,
of
I have.
different
I'm like
ones.
the Jane of all trades, master of none.
Does it feel, do you get a new fire
Yeah.
to I mean, you know, and that's kind of where this goes. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
So
and
like it's definitely like when I switched from, especially when I switched from bodybuilding to CrossFit,
mhm.
um, like I had a blast. I had so much fun. And then similarly, when I went from CrossFit to Olympic weightlifting, that was a great challenge and super fun for me in a different type of way. And now the training that I do, I sort of do a little bit of everything, and I've added in a lot of cardiovascular endurance training into that. So,
Mhm.
and yeah, each time you do that, you sort of get reinvigorated with the process. But my training now is at a point that I love everything that I do because it is a little bit different. Like my runs are different every week, so the difference is enough to kind of keep me mentally. I do have a little bit of exercise ADD for sure, and I blame that mostly on CrossFit. But the little stimulus changes are definitely an advantage for me mentally, which allows me to, when I get into a strength training session, I'm able to give it 150% of my effort because, I might have just one day a week that's really focused on, reps in the 1 to 3 range. And I don't do that often anymore. So it's fun for me to really get in there and push those heavy weights versus, a running day where I might be doing 800 meter or 1,000 meter, repeats kind of deal.
Yeah, and I
But
think that
one thing I do want to stress here is the difference between like what are we considering to be progress, right? So every single person has an absolute ceiling for strength, and one of the lifts that this really kind of drives the point home with for me personally is strict press, like strict barbell press. No matter what, I have been doing that lift for over 20 years. The max that I have ever gotten on that is 125 pounds. And that was at the strongest point in my career. I have never, no matter what I have been doing, I have never exceeded 125 pounds. And I'm now 43 years old. That is a lift I have, and no trick of the trade, increasing volume, decreasing volume, working on my sticking point, whatever it may be. Nothing has increased that lift for me. And I need for people to understand that we all have an individual ceiling for strength unless we are intentionally okay with gaining weight so that because mass moves mass, or we're okay with getting on steroids. You can't keep going up in weight forever and ever and ever. And that doesn't mean that you're not progressing. Progressive overload, and I've said this on this podcast many times, it is a process. The consistency of that adequate stimulus is more important than and greater than that stimulus visibly appearing to increase on paper. So it applies to both the stimulus and the response. It is the process itself and not just that gradual increase of load or volume across a period of time, which is what I think most people think progressive overload is. And I really need to have people understand that.
yeah, so I've got a different way to say this. I'm not saying like if what Beth was saying is a little bit more mercurial. I know how they say it in research, which is exactly what she's saying. It's not whether or not you're going up in reps or load. The important thing in lifting to get the adaptations that you're looking for in lifting is based entirely on volitional effort. If your effort is there, and this is why we do the intensity ranges when we
Yes.
do
The
programming, because
intensity is so important
yeah,
here.
it's the number one thing. Because the
Yeah.
number one thing to increase strength or to increase lean muscle building is mechanical tension. And mechanical tension, your muscle does not know if you're lifting 135 pounds. It doesn't know if you're lifting
Yes.
145 pounds. It doesn't fucking care. All it cares is that you are maximally stimulating it in whatever way that you can. And so volitional effort, taking yourself in proximity to failure, is the name of the game. That is it.
Yep.
It's not more complicated than that. It's really
Yep.
not. I mean,
Are
once you
you
get,
adhering to the RIR? Yes or no?
yes, once you get a good program, that's it. Just focus on the RIR. That is it.
Yep. Yep.
And people struggle with this all the time because the issue with it is you're probably a lot stronger than you think you are. But to get to that point, you have to have a lot of mental fortitude because it sucks. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like you're actually injuring yourself, but there's a lot of discomfort to push yourself to, you know, close to maximum. And it's only worse with the more reps that you do. Like grinding out a 1 rep max is a lot easier than grinding out a 10 rep max. And people will say, no, that's not true. I can grind out 10 rep max. No, you're not grinding out a true 10 rep max.
No.
You're doing 10 reps.
Yeah.
You're
It
not
ain't a 10
grinding out
rep
a true
max.
10 rep max. The higher you go in volume, the higher rep range that you go, the harder it is to do.
Yep.
It's probably, if you're doing like a bicep curl and you're doing 30 reps, you don't notice that it's harder right at it ends because you can just let your arm kind of go slack. Whereas like you could get buried with a squat, but the effort that it takes when you're using similar amounts of musculature, similar amounts of CNS, with between exercises. So like if you're comparing a 1 rep max squat to a 20 rep max squat, you got to compare within exercises technically to do this. I challenge anybody to get a spotter, do a 1 rep max squat, hit your true 1 rep max. Then immediately following it, hit a 10 or 20 rep max with a spotter telling them you're going to fail. You are literally going to fail the lift. You're going to tell me that really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts a lot more and it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot harder to recover from. Like, and that's one of the funniest things, I've talked about in the past on some other, it was on Andrew Coates' show where we talked about one guy said like he does 1 rep maxes times 20 as a workout. And I was like, that would take forever. One. And
Why?
I don't know. And he's like, I'm so hardcore. And it's like, guy, this is, you're just making it take forever. Like you're gonna still like put in a lot of effort, but you might as well, if you're going for, hypertrophy, just do a higher rep range. But understanding that the higher rep range can be really challenging when volitional effort is difficult because the perceived exertion is a lot higher. This is why people struggle to really change their bodies because they get to 80, 85% and they think it's 100. And you never really know until you get a spotter and you tell
Yeah.
them because you need a spotter to do this. You have to
Yeah.
have a spotter on most lifts that you could potentially injure yourself on. You have to have a spotter to give yourself that emotional green light to challenge yourself. Otherwise, you won't. You're going to have a defensive reflex and you're going to pull out early. But if you have a spotter and you actually challenge yourself to get there, you're going to realize what we're saying here. But it's important for you to test that every once in a while because when you test that, you start to realize one, what it feels like, and two, your boundaries. And I think it's really important for people to know their boundaries. And it's one of the reasons that, I mean, I'm a USAPL, a United States powerlifting coach, a club powerlifting coach. We talk about when we're training people for strength, you never have to do a 1 rep max. To progress your strength to maximum, you never have to do a 1 rep max. You live in 3 to 8 reps. However, when you're competing or when you really want to understand what you can do, you have to do that. And it's not for the physical benefits. You're not
Mm-hmm.
physically getting a benefit from a 1 rep max. You're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's no physical benefit from a 1 rep max. Because the only way that you would get a physical benefit is if you were doing that nonsense program where you're doing like 20 reps of it. It's the only way you would need the volume. you're not doing it for a physical benefit. You're doing it because you need to learn how to grind out a 1 rep max. And that's a mental and emotional thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't need these things physically to progress, but you probably should test. And I'm not saying do test 1 rep maxes, but I'm saying like, because not everybody needs to do 1 rep max. You only need to test 1 rep maxes if you're doing 1 rep maxes in a competition. Otherwise, I haven't done a 1 rep max in things for like 5 years, 6 years. There's no reason to, but I should probably take 5 reps to max. I should probably take 10 reps to max occasionally, just to kind of gauge where am I right now? How does this feel? And even advanced lifters need that reminder from time to time because it's going to feel a little bit different at different experience levels that you have at different times in your life. It's a good reminder. It's a good test.
Dude, a
But
10 rep max is so disgusting.
it's like the worst thing in the world.
It's so
I've never done a rep
disgusting.
max above that, but I've done 10 rep max squats and
Oh,
it's the worst thing that I've ever done.
I've done a 20 rep max front squat before and I wanted to die.
I would choke myself out from doing that.
Die.
I lose breath in front squat by like 10 reps.
But yeah, I've done 10 and 20 rep. I never that's the kind of test that I never want to do. It's just it's so painful and it's so uncomfortable and it's so debilitating. Like you get through a true 10 rep max back squat, you're on the ground for 10 minutes easily.
Mhm.
It's awful.
All right. So volitional effort, intensity. One last thing, and then we're wrapping this up. The last thing that you should consider if you feel like you're in a fitness plateau is, do you need a deload? Deloads are not something that I typically plan unless we plan an overreaching phase intentionally. Then I will plan it. For most deloads, if you're planning for yourself and you don't know how to do overreaching, you shouldn't be doing overreaching anyways. But if you are doing overreaching phases, you can plan it ahead. If you're not, typically taking these things as they come and based on auto-regulating makes a lot of sense. But this is actually where auto-regulating comes into play. You've gone through everything. You've evaluated whether or not you're actually at a plateau based on what we said here. You've tried some of the other alternatives to figure out, okay, do I have a solution to fix this issue? And if you continue to struggle, take a deload. Take a week.
Hmm.
Make a plan on set a date, set a time when you're going to get back on plan. Never let that, up to chance. But you can take a deload where you cut volume, load. I mean, you cut volume by like 50%, you cut load by like 30% or so, maybe a little bit more. I mean, the way that they do deloads are interesting because there's not a ton of research on it. My buddy Lee Bell did a couple studies on deloads, and I was actually one of the study participants in it. And they figured out, okay, we wanted to take experienced coaches in his studies, a variety of experienced coaches, and they ran us through questionnaires on like how we run deloads. And the general consensus was cutting volume by about 50%, cutting intensity by about 30 to 40%. Now, this is different than if you're a powerlifter that's listening to this and you're giving yourself a taper into a competition. That's completely different. I've even Lee and I were talking about this. Powerlifters, for some reason, when you say deload and you talk about what I'm talking about here, they get super butthurt because they're confusing a taper with a deload. And so in a taper, you're not necessarily dropping load, you're dropping volume to lead into a competition the week before competition. With the deload, we also see drops in load at the same time. And you do, light cardio. Maybe you go into the gym 3 times that week that you're deloading and you just work out for 45 minutes. You hit some lifts for fun. You just keep the blood flowing and then you go home. Keep your nutrition as it is normal. Don't do any extensive heavy cardio. Getting in and jogging for 20 minutes is completely fine. Going for your 45-minute walk is completely fine. Running a marathon is not fine. That is not part of a deload. So be very careful about that kind of thing. And then come back the next week, and maybe this is where you institute the change of pace. Maybe you try a different training block the next time. Maybe you do some different exercises. Maybe you pick up your nutrition, whatever it is. But this can be the thing that you need, particularly if mentally and emotionally you're just kind of down. You typically enjoy going to the gym and now it's all of a sudden a drag, or you've got some nagging injuries. It's a great time to take a deload and say, hey, I've had some niggling injuries on my knees, my elbows, and maybe just giving it some time to calm down would be a good thing. I mean, that's awesome for a deload. That's what it's there for. And so take those and then come back renewed in a week and hit the weights and start to progress again. All right, everybody. That is it for us today. Thank you for joining us on another episode of No Bull Just Bacon. Make sure to keep an eye out for the Q&As in my Instagram stories. We appreciate all the support that you give us on Instagram, Facebook. Make sure that you ask your questions and we will get to them in future episodes of the podcast. Take it easy.